The Last Stand of Rivermarch, a tale of survival and sacrifice. Certainly, here's a gripping war story that delves into themes of survival, camaraderie, and sacrifice set against the backdrop of a brutal conflict. The Last Stand of Rivermarch. The war had raged for years. What had started as a territorial dispute between two neighboring kingdoms, Illyria and Varden, had escalated into an all-consuming conflict that stretched across the continent. Towns were razed, families torn apart, and entire villages left in ruin. The once lush fields and forests of the land had turned to scorched earth, and the rivers that once fed the kingdoms now ran with the blood of the fallen. Rivermarch, a small town nestled along the riverbanks that separated Illyria from Varden, had been a quiet haven before the war. But now, it was a strategic point of great importance. The river was the only supply route that could still carry vital resources to Illyria's armies, and the town's defenses had become the last line of resistance against the advancing Varden forces. The town's commander, Captain Ilara Dernhelm, was a woman hardened by years of fighting. She had grown up in Rivermarch, a place of peace and simplicity, but the war had stolen her youth, her family, and now her hope. Her face was lined with the scars of battle, both physical and emotional, and her eyes reflected the weariness of a leader who had seen too many soldiers fall under her command. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, Ilara had not given up. She knew the importance of Rivermarch's defense, not just for the survival of her people, but for the very future of Illyria. As the Varden forces, under the command of General Kael Varos, advanced towards Rivermarch, the town's defenders prepared for what was surely to be their final stand. The enemy army outnumbered them 5-1, and their weapons were far superior. The Illyrians were equipped with outdated armor and rusted swords, while the Varden soldiers wore sleek black plate and wielded advanced crossbows and siege weapons. Ilara's second-in-command, Lieutenant Toma Vex, was a young and idealistic officer, eager to prove himself. He had joined the army in his youth, inspired by tales of heroism and glory, but the brutal reality of war had quickly stripped away his innocence. Toma had seen his fair share of death and destruction, but this battle felt different. The enemy was too strong, and they had nowhere to retreat to. "Captain," Toma said as he approached Ilara in the war room, his face grim, "we can't win this. Our forces are too few, and the enemy is too strong. If we're to survive, we'll have to abandon Rivermarch and fall back." Ilara turned to face him, her gaze cold yet understanding. She knew that Toma's suggestion was logical, pragmatic even, but abandoning their home was not an option. "We've fought too long for this land, Toma," she replied, her voice firm. "We stand here not just for Rivermarch, but for everything that it represents. If we give up now, all the sacrifices of our people, all the lives we've lost, will have been in vain." Toma hesitated, his eyes searching hers. He could see the resolve in her expression, but also the doubt that lurked behind it. "You know we can't hold out forever, Captain. The Varden are relentless." Ilara placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice softer now. "Then we make them pay for every inch of ground they take. We fight until the last man, until the last breath." The night before the battle, Ilara gathered her soldiers in the town square for a final rally. The people of Rivermarch, though not soldiers, stood with them, ready to defend their homes. The men and women who had once tilled the fields and crafted goods now stood with weapons in hand, determined to protect what they had left. "You are not just soldiers," Ilara told them, her voice carrying over the gathered crowd. "You are the heart of Illyria. This town, this river, this land, we fight for them all, and we will not fall, not without making them pay." The battle began at dawn. The Varden forces, well organized and disciplined, advanced in perfect formation, their siege weapons slowly pushing forward. The Illyrians, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of battle as swords clashed and arrows flew. The streets of Rivermarch ran red, and the once beautiful town became a battlefield where men and women, old and young, fought for survival. Captain Elara led from the front, her sword cutting through the enemy ranks as she drove her troops forward. Toma, though still young and inexperienced, fought with a passion that inspired those around him. Despite the overwhelming odds, the defenders of Rivermarch held their ground, refusing to give an inch. But as the day wore on, the enemy's sheer numbers began to tell. The Illyrian forces, exhausted and battered, were pushed back. The town's walls were breached, and the Vardan soldiers poured into the streets, overwhelming the defenders. As the battle raged on, Elara and Toma found themselves in the heart of the town square, surrounded by enemy soldiers. Elara's sword was heavy in her hand, but she fought with the strength of 100 men, her heart set on one goal, to give her people a chance to escape. Toma, fighting alongside her, was fierce and unrelenting, but he could see the toll the battle was taking on his captain. "Elara, we have to fall back," Toma urged, blood pouring from a gash on his side. "There's no more time." But Elara shook her head, determination flashing in her eyes. "We make our stand here, Toma. We fight until the last." Just as the enemy closed in around them, a loud explosion echoed through the town. The Vardan's own siege weapon, a massive cannon they had positioned to destroy Rivermarch's last defenses, had been sabotaged by a small group of Illyrian saboteurs. The blast sent the enemy soldiers reeling, giving the defenders a brief moment of respite. "We've bought them time," Elara whispered, her eyes meeting Toma's. "Now, we fight to the end." The final stand of Rivermarch became a legend. The defenders fought with everything they had left, slowing the enemy long enough for the rest of the town to escape. Elara and Toma held their ground side by side until the end, knowing that their deaths would not be in vain. As the sun set on that fateful day, Rivermarch was lost, but its people were not forgotten. The war would continue, but the courage and sacrifice of the defenders of Rivermarch became a symbol of hope to the people of Illyria. Elara Dernhelm's name was forever etched into the history of the kingdom, a reminder of the price of freedom and the indomitable spirit of those who fight for it. This story centers around themes of sacrifice, loyalty, and the harsh realities of war, showing how even in the face of overwhelming odds, individuals can make a lasting impact on history.